you. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Maryam Hilli, your host, and joining me is my co-host and mental health professional, Sister Anisa Diab. Welcome to the show, Sister Anisa.
Thank you so much.
Today, Sister Anisa, we're talking about choosing the right spouse, and we're joined by a very special guest. She's a licensed professional counsellor in the private practice based in Northern Virginia. She provides counselling for a wide range of mental health issues, specialising in marriage counselling and trauma treatment. She's also a founding member of Peaceful Families Project, an organisation dedicated to ending domestic violence in Muslim communities. She has authored several publications addressing domestic violence, relationship and mental health issues in Muslim communities. She's also got a book that's specific to the issue that we're discussing today, and it's called Before You Tie the Knot, along with Imam Muhammad Haj Majid. Please join me in welcoming Sister Salma Abugideiri. Welcome to the show, Sister.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking part in the show. I just wanted to ask you, as a licensed professional counsellor who works with couples, what do you feel is the best way for individuals looking to get married to engage in Islamic dating? And do you even agree with the term Islamic dating?
Well, you'd have to define the term in order for me to tell you if I agree with it or not. So what do you mean when you say Islamic dating?
I guess, thanks for putting me on the spot. We're talking about perhaps two Muslims taking part in getting to know each other, I guess.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So, I think it's important because the word dating has so many different connotations, right?
Yeah.
And, from an Islamic perspective, we have some clear guidelines on what we can and we cannot do. So I think that when people have a clear intention that they're trying to get to know each other for the purpose of marriage, then, and they are avoiding, crossing into any boundaries that are not allowed in Islam, then, that's not only is it okay, but it's, something we should encourage people to do, getting to know each other for the purpose of marriage. So having a clear intention, communicating really clearly what your boundaries are and sticking to the boundaries that Islam has, I think is the best way to go about it. And it's going to vary from culture to culture and context to context.
And is it okay for us to use the word dating?
I think any word is okay to use as long as people know what it means, right? And dating means different things to different people. I personally don't like the term because just generationally, dating is not something that Muslims did, right? So I put that all in quotes as, growing up, that was the messaging. Younger people are much more comfortable with the term dating. But again, let's define it. Growing up, dating, I went to public school, dating was going to a movie theater and making out in the movie theater. This is not okay for us as Muslims, right? Islamic dating or halal dating is getting to know each other with that clear intention and within the boundaries. So then it's fine. I prefer to use a longer phrase, which is, getting to know each other for the purpose of marriage. But whatever works for people, as long as we're all understanding what we mean, I think it's fine.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, if you've noticed there being a pattern when it comes to marital success in the Muslim community, and what's the courtship period like prior to marriage?
So as a therapist, I do tend to work with people who are already having problems, right? So I don't really get a lot of time with people who are doing well and have done well in their marriage. So I have, that's a skewed sample. Definitely, I think that we have research that tells us that people who engage in premarital counseling have a 31% less chance of divorce. So we know that there are many things that can be done before marriage that can optimize your likelihood for success. And one of that is taking the time to go through a selection process very intentionally, identifying what really matters to you long term, what are your goals, your values, finding a partner that's compatible. And in our context as Muslims, the family piece is very important. So making sure that somehow or another family is on board, you have that support, and that people go through the process of really getting to know themselves and learning some skills, communication, conflict resolution. There's so much work to do to prepare for marriage. If people can be intentional about that, then it doesn't mean they'll have zero problems, but it means they'll be able to identify them quicker and have resources and tools to hopefully, work through them and have resources to work through them. So that's the goal. And when people trust their gut, a lot of times I ask people, when did you first know that there was a problem? And they say, I had this feeling, but I kind of ignored it, or I was hoping things would change. So I always tell people, trust your gut, and listen to that inner wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each of us. Because there's a lot of pressure sometimes that we just have to make it work, even though my gut is telling me this is not a good idea. So it's not easy. So I think having support is really important as well. It's kind of a long-winded answer.
Thank you so much. No, it was perfect. Thank you. And Sister Anisa, if I bring you into the discussion, many people take to the internet or like phone apps when it comes to trying to find a spouse, because it's quite difficult in this day and age. What are some of the precautions, in your opinion, that should be taken into consideration when using such apps?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the trend nowadays with the use of phone apps and matrimonial sites. And I remember when, many years ago when I was getting to know my spouse, at that time it was very much stigmatized to say to somebody, oh, I met somebody online, or this is how I met my spouse. But I think now it's becoming more of a norm to utilize these tools, especially we have Muslims living in very rural areas where there may not be many other Muslims to select from, or just in this pandemic, right? It's very hard to get to know people in person. So I think we're seeing a spike in the usage. So having said that, I've known a lot of couples that have gotten married that way through these sites, and they're happily married. But as many of the viewers may have heard, there are also disasters that can occur from that as well, especially if certain precautions aren't taken into consideration. So I would say that it's really important that if you're meeting somebody online, you take your time. You make sure that you are getting to know them, not just in the online environment, but you also have plenty of in-person visits and opportunities to see how they interact in their environment. How do they, treat the waiter at a restaurant? How do they interact with their family? How do they act when somebody, cuts them off in traffic and they're driving? There's so much you have to take into consideration in that person's natural environment that might differ than, being behind a screen. And I think also in this day and age with filters, with all these different apps, it's really easy to manipulate one's appearance too. So sometimes people get catfish and they think somebody looks a certain way, and then in person, it's like, wow, you're a different human being. And I think that it's really important to have physical attraction as well as spiritual, emotional attraction too. So that has to be taken into consideration. As much as possible, spend time with the person, with a third party, again, keeping it within the bounds of Islamic dating, halal dating, whatever you want to call it. And I think also it's incredibly important to get different references on the person. So ask the individual, do you have anybody that I could speak to that can talk about your character? And that way you're also getting references. And if things progress, to a point where this is really moving in the right direction, get a background check too, criminal background check. Make sure there's no history of prior arrests or domestic violence or any kind of child abuse. All of that is important to take into consideration.
I think one of the things that people fear when it comes to dating or, getting to know someone is the fear of them being ghosted. So Sister Anisa, how can Muslims deal with the behavior such as ghosting?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's probably one of the biggest complaints I'm getting now from young Muslims that I'm seeing who are looking to get married, especially with these apps and all of that. So let's first define what is ghosting, right? So ghosting is when somebody chooses to abruptly cut you off in some way. They won't respond to your calls, your messages. Essentially, they disappear. So psychologists have all sorts of ideas about why this happens. And And some of the ideas that we've come across are that, you know, they don't want to hurt you. They might not know what to do in the situation. They are trying to avoid an uncomfortable situation of maybe discussing why they don't want to move forward anymore, or it's a passive way to withdraw. But either way, it's really traumatizing for the person on the other end. It's emotional cruelty. You really don't want to do that to somebody, because the other person on the other end is thinking, okay, what just happened? Is this person okay? Did they get injured in a car accident? Is their family okay? Are they just busy with work? So it's a form of silent treatment. You feel powerless in that situation when you're on the other end. You feel silenced. You don't know how to make sense of all of that. So I think the way to cope is to first recognize that sadly it's most likely going to happen to you at least one time in this process, especially in the online realm. And, you know, just make sure not to take it personally. You know, a lot of times people ask themselves, am I not good enough? What's wrong with me that this keeps happening to me? Whereas really it's just a very emotionally immature phenomena that we see. So when this happens, make sure to invest time with your friends, your family, who can support you through that. Have yaqeen and certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his plan for you, that, you know, he really doesn't want you to be with such a person to begin with, because this is an individual who violated, you know, the contract of what it takes to be in a mature, healthy relationship, right? So you don't want to be with such a person anyway. And you know, at the end of the day, a person who has that behavior is not going to be right for you.
Thank you for that. We have viewers from all around the world who tune into the show, and the sad reality is that even in the year 2022, there are still some people who don't have the same free will to make choices when it comes to their spouse. Some are even perhaps betrothed to people from when they are babies. But just a few weeks ago, actually, we heard about the incident with the Iraqi teenager Maryam Rikabi, who was attacked with acid for refusing a marriage proposal. So, Sister Salma, I'd like to come to you. What advice do you have for those who might find themselves in a situation where they're not able to choose for themselves? And what is our duty and our response as a community to uphold true Islamic values?
That was such a good question. I mean, that case is, of course, so painful and disturbing. And, you know, I think we have to think of this as in two parts. There's the prevention piece and the intervention piece. So prevention piece, we really need to do a much better job as a community, educating our young people who are looking to get married, as well as parents, that, you know, it is a basic part of the marriage contract, Islamic marriage contract, the free will and consent of each person. And that's a basic condition. So those of us who are involved in pressuring people to get married or forcing someone to get married know that we are violating our Islamic, you know, responsibility. And that's not a parental right to force your child to get married to someone. Even if you think it's the best person for your child, it's not within the parental rights at all. And actually, if we do that, we're crossing into abuse. So forced marriage is a kind of abuse, and we know that there are so many harms that come out of it, right? So as parents, you know, it's important to remember, ultimately, we want our children to be happy. And if we force our kids to do anything, they're not going to be happy. And if we aren't helping the adult child, choose a spouse intentionally, their commitment to the marriage can't be there as well, you know? So there's a lot of things we can do in the prevention realm around education. And I think that every person, regardless of whether they have the choice or not, has to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them that choice, right? Some of us, unfortunately, find ourselves in abusive context. And sometimes people start to think that this is Islam or this is Allah, and it's not fair. You know, Allah is not kind to me or does not love me. But in actuality, you know, our religion provides all of these rights. And so we have to know that and remember that is our right. And when we know that it's our right, we might have a little more ability to protest. And that protest is going to look different. So there's no advice that's going to fit across the board for all situations. It's really important to remember that. But within your situation, if there is anyone that you can appeal to, there's usually somebody in the extended family that might listen. It may not be the parents, it may be an uncle, a cousin, and another elder, or there may be a respected friend that the parents might be open to hearing from. I think it's really important to talk to someone. If you have access to an imam, if you have access to a counselor, I know that here, in our area, a lot of times students at universities have actually voiced their concerns in the health center, to a nurse or a physician, and that can be the beginning of getting out of a forced marriage situation. So just talk to people. Think about who you could start talking to, and that person might help you brainstorm. But you have to first know that you shouldn't be forced into it. And it is within your right to oppose your parents if they are asking you to do something that is not right. If they're asking you to do something that's un-Islamic, which is, getting married without consent is un-Islamic, you have the right to push back. You have an obligation as well, because parents will sometimes use that, card, the authority card. You have to obey, and we don't obey in anything that's not correct. So those are some thoughts, but we have a lot of work to do to change the culture in many of our communities so that the people who are seeking marriage as well as the parents understand the right way to do this.
Thank you. And we do often hear people say that you don't actually know someone until you move in with them or you live with them. So it brings me to my next question, which is there any specific amount of time or, a rough like guide of how long someone should get to know someone before they get married?
People get really frustrated with me because I always say there's really no formula for any of this. It depends. Yeah. It always depends. But some of the things that Sister Anisa mentioned earlier are really important, regardless of whether you're getting to know someone through an app or in person. So to me, it's not so much the amount of time as what are you able to do within that time, right? So being able to see people in different contexts. Are there other people that know this person, or is this an entirely unknown, right? So sometimes you're introduced to someone, but no one else in the community knows this person. You need to spend a lot more time getting to know that person than a person who perhaps is introduced to you and your family has known their family, and the neighbors know him, and he's known in the community. So it really depends, but you just have to be able to get enough sense of who is this person, how does this person conduct themselves in different settings, as Anisa brought up. Think about how and where you met this person, right? So did you meet this person in a context where they're really having to perform, for example, maybe this person is a public speaker, okay? Or even in my case, people may experience me as a therapist in one way. That's my professional self, but I'm not a perfect human being. I might give really great advice. I could be a really great therapist. In my personal life, I have some stuff I need to work on too, like everybody else. So sometimes we see someone in a public setting and we're like, oh, wow, this person is perfect. But we didn't take the time to see them in private settings. How do they deal with frustration? How do they act when they're mad? How do they act when things don't go their way? How do they solve problems? When you're not on that pedestal, how are you acting when you're, in normal life? So it's really important that you have the opportunity. And sometimes people can do that in a matter of weeks or months. Sometimes it takes years because there isn't enough opportunity to get to know the person. So it depends.
Thank
you.
I
hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. Sister Anisa, would you like to weigh in?
For sure. I definitely agree with Sister Salma that there's no formula in terms of how long it's going to take. And I think, again, now it's more complicated in the climate we're living in. It's not just as easy as it was before, especially if it's a long distance, commitment, getting to know this person. It's not as easy to hop on a plane and go see somebody with sometimes the travel restrictions that we see. So what might have taken, 4 or 6 months for one person may take up to a year for another person. But I think that I want to speak to the pressure. There's just a lot of pressure that I'm seeing with young people to just make a good decision because, oh my God, what if the community finds out that you're speaking to somebody for marriage and that's not going to look good on us? And what else do you really need to ask? Why can, I met your mother, just a few times and that was good enough for me and we're happy. So I just think there's so much pressure on young people and misinformation from friends that, oh, it's normal to have cold feet. It's normal to have hesitations before you get married. No, that's not normal. If you have hesitations, you need to get that addressed. As Sister Salma was saying earlier, you have this gut feeling, we have this fitra that Allah has given us. And when something isn't right and there's a voice inside us that says, no, stop, like slow down, it doesn't matter who's telling you to speed up. You really do have to listen to that.
Thank you. And it brings me on to my next question, which is I've come across a lot of young people who are in the process of looking for a spouse. And one of the things that really put them off is the fact that they get rejected. So they put themselves out there, they meet someone, and then it doesn't work out, and then they have to go through that whole cycle again and again. So, Sister Salma, if I come to you first, how can those who are in that situation deal with or handle rejection?
It's such a hard thing to deal with. I think to start out, when you're starting this journey of finding a spouse, you have to realize that rejection is part of that process. It's just part of the process. It's like, when you're looking for a job, you might have to send out 100 resumes and you're going to get one job. You might get 2-3 offers if you're lucky, but that means that, 97 rejections or 93 rejections, whichever it is. So it is part of the process, number one. Number two, it will hurt. So even though it's part of the process, it's going to hurt, and you have to just be very kind with yourself and give yourself time to heal and grieve, because different rejections have different degrees of pain depending on how invested you were in that relationship or the process. So give yourself time to heal, and then you need to connect with people who are going to remind you that you are loved and that you are wanted and valuable. So people who make you feel good about yourself, and people who remind you that while you're experiencing this difficulty, there is still so much good in your life. And also zoom out to that spiritual connection that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what Sister Anisa, you were referencing earlier about, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. So this is part of the process. If this person rejected you, they're probably not the right person for you. And so much better to know that before you're stuck, in a bad marriage. But it can take a lot of positive self-talk and encouragement from friends to pick yourself back up and try again. And sometimes it's okay to take a break. I know that there are people who, they're working so hard to find a spouse. They're facing rejection, a lot of pressure from all angles. And they just then decide, okay, I'm going to take a break for a few months. I'm going to stop looking. That's okay. Totally okay. So you have to take care of yourself in this process. It is, unfortunately, for many people, a difficult process. It's not easy. Some people, subhanAllah, they do find a spouse quickly and they're happy and everything works out, seems to be easy. And other people, it's more of a struggle, and that's their test, right? And everybody will have a test. So don't compare yourself to anyone. Some people are not tested in the marriage process. They're tested in another way. But zooming out and really connecting with all the resources that you have will help you to recover. And people do recover, right? And then listen to success stories. Listen to people who have gone through that, rejection. They found a spouse, they're happy, so that you have hope, right? It's really important not to lose that hope.
Thank you. And Sister Anisa?
Sister Salma said it beautifully, honestly, and I would just add to that on the other end, don't be, don't feel bad about being the one who rejects the other person in the process. I've also seen the other side of it, where a person has wanted to turn down another individual for marriage, but they are so worried about hurting that individual's feelings, and they're such a nice person, and I don't want to, I know it would destroy them if I said no. And believe me, it's so much better to end things before it gets serious, before you end up in a relationship where you've already checked out before it started, just leading to divorce, right? This is all part of Allah's master plan for you, and it is the right thing to do, to let that person know as soon as possible if you're just not interested anymore.
Thank you so much for that. Some of us are in family systems where parents are expected to play a major role in spousal selection, even though they might themselves be in abusive marriages or possess narcissistic character traits. What can someone do in that situation, Sister Salma, to ensure that their parents don't endorse someone for them who possesses similar toxic characteristics?
I mean, I don't know if you can prevent your parents from endorsing someone that may not be a good match or might be abusive or narcissistic, but you can, of course, always speak out. And if you happen to be part of an abusive family system, very important to bring other people in. So similar to, what I said about a situation where you may not have your own choice, you don't feel like you have the choice. Similar situation, see if you can bring other people in. See if you can find someone, I ask people sometimes to just go through a mental checklist of the people in their family and in their trusted circle. There's almost always someone who didn't follow the script and who isn't in an abusive relationship, or who isn't, pro marrying somebody that you're not interested in or who's not a good fit. So think about those relatives who you might bring in to help you. Or if your family is close to the Islamic community, the Muslim community, and bringing an imam might be appropriate. Definitely you can always, reach out to a therapist and have a space to think through what is the best solution for my situation, right? So having someone even just to help you think through, ask you questions so that you can figure it out, and problem solve it together. That can be very helpful. We can't control our parents or anyone else for that matter, but we can control ourselves, and we can, try to access and utilize any possible resources that we have. I know a lot of people sometimes don't think they have any resources. When you first ask them, is there anyone else that could help? No, there's nobody. But after talking and really exploring, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't ever give us a test that doesn't have a way out. But sometimes we don't see the way out. So we should enlist people that can help us find that way out, right? Otherwise it can be really overwhelming and depressing. So reach out to someone, a good friend, therapist, imam, another relative, and talk it through.
Thank you so much. And so, Sister Anisa, some people who are unhappy with their family or their current life situation might look to marriage as a means of peace and contentment, that that's what they're looking for, or that's what they think they're looking for. Some people might find themselves speeding up the process of getting to know someone just in an effort to escape. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so that age where people start to look for a spouse, typically it's in the early 20s, right? Maybe even a slightly earlier, in the college age years. It can be a time where there is a lot of emotional turmoil, and I think we have to acknowledge that there are maybe a lot of challenging situations happening during that time period of adulthood. But to try to escape from it through marriage isn't going to fix those problems. And I've seen that happen, and people so remorseful time and time again, where they've said things like, yeah, I just couldn't stand living at home anymore. I just needed to get out. This guy was nice. He was willing to support me and care for me. And then, they speed through the month of getting to know each other, and she gets there, and it's like a completely different human being she's seeing, and a completely different life of what he or she expected. So it's not a good idea, right? You don't want to choose somebody in life to make you happy. You want to choose someone who's going to add to the happiness and the tranquility that's already within you. And I think people do that mistake of relying on a future spouse to make them happy. But the truth is, you are the only one that can make yourself happy. And there's so many ways to contentment, whether that's, taking that time to find meaning in your relationship with Allah, or, pursuing higher education, or volunteering in the community, finding a higher purpose, and building yourself from the inside of yourself and then outwards is what's going to help you attract the right person as well at the end of the day. When you feel confident in yourself and you're not looking to somebody else to fill a void, that's when you attract the right kinds of relationships.
Thank you. My next question is for both of you, and I do apologize if it's coming across as a personal question, but when you were getting to know somebody, what were some of the red flags and the green flags that helped you, determine who was the right person for you? Sister Salma, I'll come to you first.
So I got married very young, and I didn't really know a whole lot about red flags or green flags. So when I was thinking about this question, I was like, how did I actually think about this? But I apparently did have some parameters. For me, it was really important to marry somebody that was had a similar upbringing to me. And so, I think what I was looking for really was a person that has similar values, a person that has some similar outlook, and a similar relationship to Islam. When I was growing up, we were the only Muslims in our community, in our town, for most of my life. So, that was my generation. And so it was important to me that I married somebody who grew up in a similar way, somebody that I could relate to in that way. So the red flag for me, I think I might have only had a couple, is somebody who's not practicing. That was a red flag for me because I needed someone who was similar in my level of practice. And the other red flag was somebody who can't get along with my family. Because since we didn't really have even a Muslim community at that time, my family was it. And so I needed this person to be able to get along with my family, somebody that my parents liked and my siblings liked. So it was pretty simple. I didn't have that much knowledge of relationships at the time, but that's what I was looking for.
Thank you. And Sister Anisa?
Yeah, for me, my green flags were looking for somebody with integrity, somebody who was, a spiritual individual, but constantly looking to improve themselves. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I received in that process from one of my mentors in the community, she said, look for somebody who's hardworking, not so much the titles and the degrees and, the doctor, engineer, or whatever, but somebody who's hardworking, because success will always follow such an individual. And alhamdulillah, that's what I really looked for. And it turned out to be a very valuable thing in my marriage to be married to somebody who's constantly, working towards bettering themselves and providing and excelling in their career and excelling in their relationships. So to me, red flags were, it was somebody who was unwilling to support me, my dreams, my ambitions, or just, kind of one way or the highway mentality. If I had a difference of opinion, just unwilling to accept influence or, changing their mind about something when presented with different, opinions or thoughts. And it was also a turnoff to me if somebody was, engaging in multiple relationships and playing around and clubbing or whatever. And then finally, when they want to settle down and find a spouse, it's like they want, the virgin individual who's just so pure. So that double standard never sat well with me. But I would say to the viewers, your red flags might be different from somebody else's red flags. And I think you have to check in with yourself, after you have a phone conversation with somebody that you're talking to for marriage, like spend a little time self-reflecting. How do I feel right now? I mean, do I feel, like this person, made me feel safe for me to share certain things? Did I feel criticized? am I looking forward to the next conversation? Like, notice your mood over time and see if this is a person that you feel comfortable and safe around, that you can be vulnerable with. So again, regardless of what everybody else thinks and the information that you might share with your parents about, yeah, he says this and that, you know, if it's not making sense to you, if you're not seeing potential for a connection, that's when you have to slow down your brakes.
Thank you. There'll be a lot of people who are watching the show who've been trying to look for a spouse for a very long time. They'll be struggling to find a spouse, or they might even know someone close to them who's been in that situation. And then being kind of stuck in this process of finding someone for a long time can make you feel hopeless and discouraged at times. What words do you have for someone who's going through something like this? Sister Salma, I'll come to you first.
Sure. I mean, I think that it's really important to validate those feelings of hopelessness that can set in, and that's really normal, you know, part of the process. Marriage is so highly encouraged for us as Muslims, and then in our, you know, respective cultures, there can be so much pressure, as, you know, Sister Anisa mentioned, there's so much pressure. So people can start to get hopeless even in the very beginning of their journey. And then there are people who really for years may not find a spouse. And so I think it's important that we give each other support, and that you seek out support, informal support, as well as professional support if you need it. That hopelessness is a really important feeling, and it can be overwhelming and overpowering. I know people who have, you know, sometimes started to feel suicidal as a result, feeling very desperate. Unfortunately, community and family might not help when they're, you know, they keep saying, oh, you're getting so old, you're never going to find anyone, you're bringing shame to our family because you're not married. When you don't get married, your sister can't get married. I mean, none of those things is helpful. And it can take a real toll on people's mental health. So I encourage everyone to seek out support, as much support as you can and as much support as you need. The truth is, though, that not everyone's going to get married, and that's okay. Like, it's okay. There is nothing wrong with you necessarily if that is not what's written for you. Just like not everyone is going to have, you know, the career that they dream of. And so sometimes getting professional support to grieve the loss of the dream, the loss of the hope, just like not everyone who wants children will be able to have children. So this is a reality, and we have to be able to support each other when this is the reality, and that could be someone's test. So, you know, yes, it's hard, and it's okay to feel down, and as much as you can, find people, again, who will help you affirm what's good in you, what's right in you, and what's going right for you, right? Because marriage is only really one part of life. It isn't really your whole life. You know, as Sister Anisa said, ultimately, you're going to make yourself happy. You have to take care of yourself. You have to find contentment and peace within yourself and in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Marriage isn't like it, as much as our community might make us believe it is. You know, you are a worthy person, even if you're not able to find a spouse yet, or even if you don't ever find a spouse. You are still a worthy person, worthwhile part of this community, and you find a way, you know, that provides meaning for you in your life.
Thank you. I think for a lot of people listening to that, they probably needed to hear that, so thank you. Sister Anisa, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that's a really important reality check for people to hear that. It's one we don't often hear in the Muslim community, but it's a form of rizq, right? When you marry somebody, this is a form of sustenance from Allah. It's decreed by Allah, right? Allah says in the Quran, we created you in pairs. So if you don't find your pair in this life, inshallah, that will be waiting for you in the next life. And I would just add to that, it's important to still leave that little window of hope open in Allah, that, you know, you never know, maybe it didn't happen in the time period that you expected in your 20s or 30s, but Allahu Alam, maybe it's something meant for you later in age. And you see these stories where somebody never, they didn't get married in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and subhanAllah, they meet the person in their 50s. And it's amazing to see when that barakah comes into your life. But I would say not to lose hope. If you're in this situation, channel that frustration and into dua, and don't ever stop praying and expecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring that kind of barakah into your life if that's really what you want. And, I grew up in a similar context with Sister Salma, where I was in a community where we didn't have a large Muslim community. We just had a few Muslim families. I remember going mosque shopping with my mom as a kid. Like, we had one very small mosque, and I never would have thought I would meet my husband near where I was living. I mean, I was going to conferences and camps and all of this. And subhanAllah, when I finished my last year of undergrad, I was about to move and go to grad school. And that's when I met my husband. And he had been living half an hour away from me for 8 years. And subhanAllah, it was a reminder to me that, you just never know. And when Allah wants something for you, he can literally bring it to your doorstep when you trust in him and you have faith in his timing. But like Sister was saying, don't get consumed in it. You need to take some breaks from time to time. You have to find other parts of your life that can bring you meaning, aside from this institution. This doesn't define your worth. And for people who haven't found somebody, take advantage of what that means for you. The freedom to travel more, freedom to focus more on your career, and to really enjoy that and enjoy being able to excel more and more and more without kids having to, be bound by scaling back part-time to take care of them or whatever. There's always pros and cons to every situation in life. And that's the same for not finding a spouse.
Thank you so much for that. And we know that finding a spouse is one part of the process, but staying in a safe and healthy marriage is a real success. Sister Salma, what ways can those seeking a spouse prepare themselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for life after marriage?
Such a great question, because so much energy is spent into finding that spouse, but once you find the spouse, that's the real work. That's when it starts, right? Because you have so much to learn about yourself in relationship and about how to bring these two lives together. So the work is never done, and I think it's important for people to know that you're entering a journey that is a lifelong journey of growth. And growth means that there's pain sometimes, there's hurt, there's frustration, it's learning. So the more that you can learn about yourself and develop your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, learn relationship skills. Like there are things that we can actually learn, right? So relationship skills, communication skills, conflict resolution skills, problem solving skills, learning how to keep things in perspective. Because sometimes what happens is we get really off balance and we put everything into the new person in our life. And we don't know how to balance the other parts of our life that are still there. We don't know how to balance between our parents and our spouse. We don't know how to balance between our career and our spouse. So really, taking the time to reflect and get guidance, talk to other couples that have succeeded, older couples, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, get advice. Don't wait until your problems are so big. It's actually much easier to solve problems when they're small in the very beginning. Get help. And you just know that it's not that you ever are done working. Okay. So marriage is not like coasting. We're not coasting. Okay. There are times when we can coast, but mostly it's continuous growth and development. And so I think if we have that attitude, so you'll be reading and listening to lectures and talking to people and reflecting, and in that way you continue to grow and develop, and your marriage will also become richer over time as you grow, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. And Sister Anisa?
I absolutely agree. And I think a lot of times we think about what we are looking for in a spouse, but we don't think about what we have to do within to be the right spouse, because it's an investment. Marriage is an investment, and you get your return based on what you put into the relationship and those emotional deposits that you make. And part of that is, I think, using this time that you're single very wisely to, explore yourself, read some books, cultivate knowledge about these life skills, like she was talking about, of how to communicate effectively and balance your time. And I love Sister Salma's book, Before You Tie the Knot. I've been recommending that to my clients. It's a book I wish that I had been able to read when I was in my search for a spouse. So, read these resources and better yourself. And this is also a great time to do some self-work. If you know you have unresolved trauma, if you know that you have a lot of anger management issues, this is a great time to get professional counseling and really work through that. Don't wait and think, oh, I'm going to wait until my spouse is going to help me become a better person, or when I feel the guilt of being a new parent to finally shape up. Do this now. It's a great opportunity. And again, like Sister Salma was saying, none of us are ever going to be perfect. I have come across clients who say, well, I don't think I'm ready yet because I still have A, B, and C, to work on, and I'm just not there. And I wouldn't let that hinder you. Be working on that. You can be, working on yourself and still striving towards that goal, because the fact of the matter is you still end up doing a lot of growing in your marriage, in your relationship. There's going to be other issues that manifest along the way that you realize you have to deal with. So don't also let that stop you if you feel you're not where you want to be in terms of, being the best spouse you can be, but work on being that best version of yourself.
Thank you so much. And before I let you guys go, one last question for our viewers. What is the biggest advice that you would give in terms of what to look for in a spouse? Sister Salma, I'll come to you first.
That's such a hard question to boil it down to one thing. But I think it's really important to look for someone that brings out the best in you, so that you are the best version of yourself when you're with that person. That, maybe one thing, if I'm only allowed to say one.
Thank you. And Sister Anisa?
Yeah, I just want to bring up a hadith that I came across a lot when I was seeking a spouse, and one that I think sometimes creates some confusion and, end with some advice related to that. So, there's a hadith from the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, that said, if a man whose religious commitment and moral conduct you approve of proposes for marriage to your daughter, then marry her to him. Otherwise, trials will prevail and great corruption will spread on the earth. So to many reading this, the interpretation is you need to look at the first good Muslim man or woman who comes to you as the answer to your du'as, and just accept that proposal right away. And I think this is oversimplifying the matter in the hadith. No doubt the Holy Prophet highly encouraged marriage and looking at religiosity as one of those many factors to consider. But, religiosity, it's not just how somebody prays or how active they are in the MSA or their external behaviors. It's also kind of a tricky thing where you're dealing with somebody's personal relationship with Allah and what's in their heart. And that's not always easy to assess on the outside. We have stories of people around the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family who were memorizing Quran and always worshiping God. But, when it came to their akhlaq and the way they treated the Prophet and the family, we see it's very abhorrent, right? So history has taught us not to be fooled by people who just have this outward religiosity and being nice is the right person. So my biggest advice is to be cautious. When you're getting to know someone, look at their akhlaq as well, the manners, how they treat people. That's also part of religion and spirituality. You have to choose somebody that you can accept in every aspect, not just somebody you respect because they were, they're a Quran teacher or they're very religious or they have a good reputation. You need to take the whole package into account and accept what parts of those the package you don't like. Can you live with that? By asking yourself, is this person respectful? Is this person someone I think I could have chemistry with? These are all just as important as religiosity. So I just want to leave the viewers with that last piece of advice.
Thank you both of you for sharing your advice with us. Sister Salma, do you have a website where viewers can reach you for more information about your services, and where are they able to purchase your publications like your book, Before You Tie the Knot?
So the book is available on Amazon, and I do have a website, wellnessthroughcounseling.com. So people are welcome to reach me through there. But I just want to say that because I'm licensed to practice in the state of Virginia in the United States, that I can only provide counseling to people who are in Virginia. And I just say that because sometimes after a talk like this, people want to reach out, and I'm not allowed to really provide that service unless people are located in Virginia. But I'm always happy to, help people find an appropriate professional if they're looking for counseling, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us in today's session and to discuss this topic that's very much needed. Dear viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon, inshallah. Take care. Ma'as salama.